My name is Dominic Frangillo, co-founder with Alex of Elected Officials to Protect America. And so excited to introduce our next speakers. Joseph McNeil, who's a former tribal council member in the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, and also the general manager for Sage Development, which is developing the Anpatuwee Wind Farm, which is poised to be the first ever 100% tribally owned wind farm in the history of the United States, a commercial scale wind farm that's indigenously owned. And Joseph has some pretty great stories that he'll share with us. And then also Christina Hollenback, who's a passionate leader in justice finance and the founder and CEO of Justice Capital. Justice Capital is working with Sage Development to organize capital to ensure that tribal and community-owned ownership of just transition projects. And I think Sage is really unique because we have to learn from projects that are Justice 40 community owned that are this far along in the process as we're structuring the IRA funds and implementation. Say, okay, what can we learn from? How can we work with you to ensure that we're actually facilitating the creation and support of more of these projects to ensure that we don't have an extractive economy, but actually true community owned projects and democratization. So take it away.
Hello, my relatives. Tatanka Wajila and Machiapi. My Lakota name is Buffalo All is One. It was my great-great-grandfather's name, One Bull. And I'm from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. And my partner here, Christina Hollenback from Justice Capital, are here to talk to you about this great project that we've been working on at Standing Rock, the 235 megawatt wind farm for the Standing Rock Sioux tribe.
Nice. So we are in the lovely place of exactly 4:30 p.m. when everyone's sugar is dropping, right? Pretty much all good. So raise of hands. Okay, you just raised your hand. I like that. All right, cool. With it. You get a car, sir. You get a car. How many of you all have projects that you are working on or that your community is working on that you came here to figure out how does this actually get financed? There we go.
I'm with you.
How many of you all are like, I'm not sure how this gets financed? There we go. Pretty much everybody. Awesome. No worries. This session is for you. So this session is where we're going to actually walk through how we've structured the opportunities that IRA offers, which is basically community ownership. It's a game changer, y'all. But we were never prepared to take advantage of IRA. So we're kind of behind the 8 ball, but not to worry because we are going to sink it in the hole. And so we're going to walk through with you a little bit about both Sage and the wind project, but we're also going to spend a good portion of our time talking about specifically how we structured the financing for this project and are continuing to structure the financing to maintain Lakota values and also attract investors, capital in at the appropriate stage of development so that, as you can see, it's not just going to have a huge impact in the community, but it's also going to create catalytic wealth building in the community. And as Joe's going to talk about, in a community that needs it quite a bit. So, Joe, let's keep it 100 with the audience. Everybody want that today? Sounds good. So let's not, I know you're a very humble person, but let's stunt a little bit. Like this is a big deal. This is the first ever commercial scale wind project that's 100% owned by the tribe, even though when you look across the country where the highest wind potential regions, highest solar potential regions are, and you layer on tribal nations, it's basically a mirror map, right? At least in this country. So can you talk a little bit about where this project came from so that folks can start to, get a sense of the community design process that came into play to unlock this opportunity?
Yeah, back in 2009 through 13, I sat on tribal council. And during that time, we put an RFP out because we knew we had good wind, right? And so we put an RFP out. We had about 8 wind developers come through and they all had their pitch. Each and every pitch led down to one singularity between them all, was that they were all just land lease deals. They all talked about the tribe will own this project at the end of its lifespan. At 20 years, you will get the wind turbines. And at that point, What do you do with 20-year-old wind turbines? You have to take them down, you have to refit them, et cetera. And so where's the benefit for that? We said, no, thank you. That's our land. We can set this aside and we can work on what could be coming up next. So we were very intentional about taking grant funding and building a renewable energy platform at the tribe, department at the tribe through land ops, and coming up with the other strategy that we were working on. And that is to do pre-development, pre-feasibility for equity into our project. We're roughly 40% poverty rate, 50% unemployment, depending on the season. A lot of money doesn't come in. We're not a casino-rich or oil-rich tribe. So we had to be very smart about how are we going to build this in a way that's real, tangible. And so the pre-development is going to be our equity stake moving into development of this project. So pre-feasibility studies from philanthropy, particularly after the No DAPL fight where we stood against big oil crossing over our water supply. People came in and said, how can we help you, Standing Rock? Put some money into our feasibility studies is where we took that money and plugged it into. So we did a lot of the work in that space. Environmental studies, cultural siting, because what we can do as a tribe is protect our own land, protect our sacred sites. Because my grandson might have a dream to go up on a hill, and if he gets up on that hill and there's a turbine there, he's not going to be able to connect because our ancestors are waiting for us to connect. Mm-hmm. All of us are indigenous to a place in the world where our ancestors speak to us. Mm-hmm. Just like my sister said earlier today, there's trauma, there's blood. We are in the soil. So it's something that we aim to protect in our project moving forward. Mm-hmm. I get a little choked up about that because that's the real meaning of what we're trying to protect and develop at the same time. Mm-hmm. An intergenerational project that is meaningful for our grandkids.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so let's dive into this because I feel like one of the things that oftentimes folks don't understand is that this actually came from a community design process. This was not just some idea that you had and you just walked in and were like, it's windy outside, we should have a wind farm. Like this went through a whole community design process. I mean, the community is behind this project. They see it as theirs. That's part of the game changer, right? Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
I think most of us that are from plain states know that it's windy, and the wind is a spirit. And for us, that's something to be respected. So like my brother over here, Sean, from the South Dakota side, and all of us in the area know that. And through our people, we spoke to the council, our council did a real hard look at, through community informed consent, through having these meetings about how do we build an entity that is going to be free from the political side of things. And that's where creating the Section 17 and SAGE came from. So we're autonomous in the way that we can do it and move our business and come into debt. Mm-hmm. And build and develop this process free from the political cycles of the tribe. And most federally recognized tribes, if not most all, can have this Section 17 organization, but any community that can gather its resources together can do the same thing. You just must come together and be unified in what your goals are going to be. Allocate those resources to whatever renewable energy asset you're going to look at if you're going to sell that commercially. So that's what our goal is, to sell this commercially. So we're in an interconnection queue process with the Southwestern Power Pool. And that's a very expensive process because each way along it to prove your project is a financial security deposit, mm-hmm. which is an unknown quantity, step by step.
Yeah, so step one, community design process. What are the assets that you already have in your community? What do communities actually want in their communities? Step two, how do you actually get the early stage capital? And if we could scroll through the slides as we're going, that would be super helpful so folks can see some visuals with it. So this is a picture. You could see there's Standing Rock. That is, as we said, those are the highest wind potential regions in the country. So it makes sense why wind farm, right? Because that's a community owned asset. If we could go to the next slide, though, the community governance structure, that allows you to make a totally different, if we could go to the next slide, that allows you to really design what is actually structured and needed, right? And so you all will be able to make sure there's jobs that go into the community. It's not just going to be a land lease deal, so you benefit from it, right? So the way that you structure that governance structure was a game changer. If we could go to the next slide. Yeah, and
board of directors.
And that's your whole board. Can you talk a little bit about what it means? What are some of the decisions that you all have made differently than other developers would have made if they didn't have true community governance?
You know, when we talk about protecting of the land and then building our local capacity as a community, this board of directors comes from a varied place of skill sets and placement in there. We have ex-chairman, we have current chairman of a regional electric co-op board, councilmen, advocates, et cetera, you know, real professionals. So, but what we do have all in common is that we're all from the same community. And that for us is that sacred protection, that unifying force to where we protect our land, protect our culture, and develop jobs, because we're doing this for our relatives. We want to break the cycle and by our own hand use revenue from the wind farm to then reinvest and be the lead investor into renewable energy projects for each of our communities to bring the cost of power down, and then provide more jobs in intergenerational education and financial institution building, so that we can build more entrepreneurship, so we can have ancillary businesses that serve our renewable energy assets.
Awesome. We can go to the next slide. And the next one, there you go. So one of the things that I think is so interesting is so many other developers are like, oh yeah, we can't move that turbine to help that wing-tailed bat that flies through X, Y, or Z. You all have totally disproven this, right? Like, you're not just operating from the baseline of what the federal government says that you need to do. You all are operating in your own cultural values, in your own way of doing things. And you're actually proving that it's really not that expensive to do that. Can you talk to us a little bit about this map and how it has changed over the last year here?
I mean, if I can, and I'm going to stand up, guys, because people are sitting here on stage very statically. But as we look at this project, on the right side of it is where we started off at in these hills. And this is the highest wind capacity. It was 50% net wind capacity, perfect wind. But up here, we had a lot of sacred sites, not good. So we ended up moving and shifting lower. In the meantime, we're doing environmental studies, which means we had to shift it again. Aquatic studies through the area, and environmental means the birds and the bats came through. The bats were going to take us off the hills in the first place anyway. So as we look through this area here, we started building into this, and then interconnection tie is 14 miles here. So now we looked into this area to build our net capacity up, because when we shifted, our net capacity dropped like 42%. Bring it back up to 46 where we're at now, is moving it a little more westward, using tribal land and allotted land and fee land to bring our power back up to the economics are really good again. Yeah. So as we go through this process, I would say this is about the 10th shift that we've had.
Yeah. And I think what's amazing about this is that actually it's only cost, I mean, I guess I'm not probably really supposed to, it's only cost like $50,000 to change this. So that is a negligible, that's like that is a rounding error to actually honor sacred sites of Indigenous people and make sure that we're not doing harm to other animals and wildlife. That is a rounding error. So any developer who tells you that they can't do that, just tell them to come and talk to us. That's a lie. But anyway, the other part that is a game changer here is you all had the ability to do that because your governance structure still owned 100% of the project.
Exactly.
That is not the way any other project basically in the game works. To get to this place, usually you sell to, for those that don't know about wind, I didn't know until we started working together, so I got the crash course. Basically what happens is to have the capital to be able to surmount all these different benchmarks, you basically have to sell out to a developer, and then the developer owns 51%. So would the developer ever make that decision? No. but the governance structure that's actually accountable to community and stewarding that would totally make that decision, right? So the opportunity with IRA is that community ownership is possible. But in order to do that, we have to make sure that the community governance structure has its capital needs met at its earliest stages of development, so it can maintain governance and ownership to make the decisions that Joe just outlined. Just want to track that everybody's good with where we're going, like picking up what we're putting down. All right, cool. Next slide. And we're going to talk about how this actually gets financed. So this initial yellow area, we kind of drew that out. That's the pre-development stage that Joe was just telling you about. All the feasibility studies, all the things, right?
We're writing hella grants, people.
Yeah, there's a lot of grants. So, and then we move into construction finance after we've basically gotten all the approvals for everything, tied everything in a bow. That's where Jay, I don't know if Jay's still here, that's where the LPO office comes in, right? But that big, long yellow arrow has to be covered by somebody else, right? And that's where we have to structure the financing. So in a traditional model, what would have happened? Developer comes in, takes the majority of the equity, takes the majority of the profits, right? And builds it however they want to build it. In this model, in our alternate universe, post-IRA, that yellow looks very different. If we can go to the next slide. So what we did was we had both private grants that came in, as Joe was already sharing, had some recoverable grants, forgivable loans that came in, right? We also had some catalytic debt and even some capped equity. We basically capped the amount of profits and equity that someone could make from the project for us to make sure that Sage had the money and has the money they need in that yellow stage, in the pre-development stage, so that when we wrap it up in a bow and sell it to a developer for construction, Sage will actually maintain 100% governance of this project. That is a round of applause moment. Thank you. Yes. So this is a game changer, right? This is a game changer because now the decisions are made differently. And guess what? Next slide, also the financial benefit is maintained differently. So those grants, catalytic capital, and then as Joe said earlier, one of the challenges is to plug into the grid. These transmission line queues are hella expensive, and that is a precise amount. And just like Joe was sharing, literally we were given 15 days to either have $970,000 or maybe 10 million. Let us know if you can do that. And if you can't, you got to go back to square one. So you've just wasted all your money.
In that process, we did a lot of things that we didn't think we could initially. That's having conversations with FERC commissioners in a very rapid way to talk about our project and how it's differentiated, because this isn't a developer-driven project. This is a community-driven project. That really perks folks' ears up. They haven't heard of this before.
Right. Because really what IRA opens up is community ownership, but nothing else is structured for community ownership, right? So we still have to go through the FERC tariff interpretation. In this region, it's with SPP that we've been working with. Right. And their interpretation is still developer centric. Why? Because we're one of one right now. They've never heard this because no one has actually ever filed a waiver and tried to do a commercial scale wind farm that's 100% owned by the community, and certainly not that's owned by tribal communities. So we had to create a loan guarantee pool basically to be able to pay those security deposits, because right now we're being burdened with what will be handled in construction finance, but we have to pay the security deposits on that now. So next slide. But the good news is, because we are structuring it in the way we are with early stage blended capital, and this is the important part, because oftentimes developers will like, oh yeah, let's get some catalytic capital at the end to cap off our last round of financial needs. No. Early stage catalytic capital, early stage grants to maintain the ownership. Now in this project, every dollar that is invested at this stage will create $11 in community wealth building back to Sage and the tribe over the life cycle of this project. That's also a round of applause moment. Awesome. And that's a game changer. Investors are still going to get back what investors want to get at this stage of development. In the construction phase, investors are going to get back what investors want at the construction phase. And Sage and the tribe are going to get $11 back for every dollar that's invested at this stage.
One thing we wanted to be sure of in this process, since we're a community-derived project moving forward, is that we didn't want to be a unicorn. Everyone, oh, this is a tribal project. Instantly, that connotes negative thought or thoughts of incapacity or inability to do a project like this, because tribes don't normally do this whenever we bring something up. But we wanted to make this project as normal, as boring as any other project moving forward.
We're not
as
boring.
Much. We're not boring. But to certain rooms, that's what you need to be. You know, the level of risk and the risk tolerance for investors and anyone else looking to invest into the project, when you bring a tribe into it, let's just be real. That's what pops up. A tribe, I don't know if they can do that if they have the capacity. What we were very intentional about in this space was bringing in consultants that led industry, you know, so that's UL, and an SPP, that's Burns and Mac. So, and SWICA for our area to do environmental consultants, and then everyone that we brought in, industry leaders. So when we said the facts and said where we got those from, people resonated with it right away.
Yeah, and this is a game changer. So if you see the next slide, that is a game changer for Sage now and for the tribe in perpetuity. Joe, you want to close us out with just a bit of a sense of what this means long-term for Sage and the tribe?
I mean, right now we're currently working on electric vehicle charging stations throughout the tribe. We're doing solar for each of our 8 community buildings. We're working on the Solar for All program. And for us to open and build and reinvest our financial security, our financial institute for our people, so that we can keep our money in our own communities and reinvigorate or build our economy by our own hand. So for us, it's investing in ourselves, you know, not just tribe and tribal members, but anybody else can come into play into this thing. But, you know, this is the ability for us to be lead investors and take the risk on our own lands and reap those rewards that were held off on by border town banks that didn't want to see investment by natives on their own land. So it means a lot to us, you know, as we come into this space and place moving forward. So we wish everybody, you know, take a look at something like what they're doing or what we're doing, because you can do it. Everybody can get it done. It's just coalescing around a smart idea and making that happen. And having good, you know, good friends, right? Like Chris.
Well, I think that also one of the pieces is that we just want to be real, that this isn't a rosy colored picture, right? Like every single step of the way, Sage is setting precedent for, to be very frank, this agency and other agencies of the federal government that never expected and never have enabled tribes to own at this scale and at this level. And so we don't want to paint some picture like this is just easy, right? But it is totally possible. And the key is community governance, the stage blended capital at the appropriate stage of development so you can maintain that governance at the important decision-making periods you need to. And then being able to really have the capacity building support to be able to surmount these different obstacles that are in front of you. And we have to do that together. So we want to learn, you know, we want to learn those things together with you. But yeah, we have to also provide this feedback. And so one of the reasons why we want to share this with you all is because we're kind of the tip of the spear right now, to be really honest. When we first were ringing the alarm around, especially the transmission queue and how much money they were expecting we were going to have to do because IRA has flushed everybody into the transmission queue. For example, everybody's like, what are you talking about? You know, and this is actually the stuff, this is the brass tacks of how IRA gets done in a way that actually creates community benefit and wealth. And so we hope that we can be partners with you all in the future as you all are thinking about this in your communities that need this type of long-term revenue and resource.
I think like Chris just said, you know, we're the tip of the spear in our area, but in this room, there are lots of spears. There's lots of tips. We're all pushing this thing together. So us communicating and having this relationship and saying, I see you, you see me, I see you, we're all in this struggle together. we're all tips of the same spear,
That's right.
moving this forward for our kids' sake.
Yeah.
So let's just think about that and continue to have the conversation. I want to thank EOPA for putting this on and everybody else to come into this room that support EOPA and our veterans and moving forward. So
Thank you all.
Thank you.